Wednesday, December 9th. Today we have a special session. We're excited to present. I want to first introduce myself. I'm Robert Theobald, the Small Business Ombudsman and Vice President of Small Business Services at the Arizona Commerce Authority. The boot camps we could not do without our community partners. These organizations, businesses have provided their time, expertise, and materials to help small businesses work through the COVID crisis as they partner with us on the boot camp. The Small Business Boot Camp and Resource Collective is designed to help small businesses of 20 or less employees, even though it's open to all employees or all businesses because the content's awesome, but to help them work through the COVID crisis and return stronger than ever. It is a statewide initiative supported by all our community partners throughout the state. And the boot camp is going to continue through December, through next week. And then we're going to pick it back up again in first week of January with some new content for 2021. The Small Business Boot Camp and Resource Collective website is an awesome website. We have a lot of information on there. You can go there to register for upcoming sessions. You'll have the link to the Resource Collective. And then you also have the archive, which includes all the previous sessions that we recorded. You can go back and watch those and download the materials that were part of those sessions. The Resource Collective link will take you to the page where we have all the materials that our community partners have provided. These are guides and resources. Here's a simple list of some of them, but they're tools to help small businesses as they work through this, know how to be safe, or unemployment insurance, guidance for barbershops and cosmetologists as an example, cleaning, etc. There's a ton of different resources. A large big box retailer actually created a tool that is non-branded, so they did it for small businesses, so small businesses could have some signing easily created for them to help support their business. There's a lot of great tools on the Resource Collective. Some quick updates. The Safest Outside Restaurant Assistance Program is now active. We'll post that link to the program in the chat box if you did not already have that. Also, today is day 2 of the ADOT, DBE, and Small Business Conference. You can still sign up. It is free to small businesses. So feel free to take advantage of that. And we'll post that link in the chat box as well. Additionally, we constantly are updating our COVID-19 business resources website. As we get new information, we update it there, and it is a great tool and resource for small businesses and businesses of all sizes. So we also want to make sure that small businesses are able to leverage the ACA's programs. We have our Small Business Services. Our Workforce Division can help with training and hiring and other items for the workforce. And our Arizona MEP focuses on manufacturing and helping manufacturers grow and develop their business. We also have our Small Business Checklist, which is a tool for all those that are looking to start a new business, start a side gig, or expand a product line into a new industry. It can help with a licensing, registration, and compliance. It's an online tool that is extremely valuable. Quick reminder as well for the state's COVID-19 information and resources. This website, arizonatogether.org, has all kinds of information to help navigate COVID. So real quick, we want to talk about some of the upcoming sessions as well. We have tomorrow, December 10th, Small Business Funding Opportunities. We've got some great partners there. Prescott Growth Partners and the Community Investment Corporation are going to share some alternative funding opportunities for small businesses. And then next week on Tuesday, we have how to increase your Google and Yelp search rankings. Working with our partner Local First, we've got LocalFi, local marketing agency, to help explain and share their expertise in these categories. And then we have on Thursday, the SBDC from Pima County, Director Ellen Curtin's going to share some information on navigating business loans during COVID-19 and working with your bank. It's going to be great sessions. So today we've got a great special session. We're excited to have a special guest in Ben Blink from the governor's office. Ben has been on the forefront in helping with the restaurant expansion and working with the restaurant grant that we'll talk about later. We've got Dan Bogart from the Arizona Restaurant Association, Roxana Pitones from the League of Arizona Cities and Towns, and John Haney from the city of Prescott, and Karen Eads from the Yavapai College SBDC. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off my slides and let them start their presentations. We're going to hear about the restaurant extension, premises extension first, and then we're going to have Ben share some information on the restaurant grant that's available. And then we'll have Q&A to wrap it all up. So if you have questions, please share them in the Q&A box. You can find that at the bottom of your screen. It says Q&A, click on that and type in your question, and we will get to those throughout the session. Lisa, there you go. Got it.
Perfect. Am I good to go, Robert?
Yes, you are good to go, Dan. You're up. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, first of all, just for by way of introduction, my name is Dan Bogart, and I'm with the Arizona Restaurant Association. And Robert and your entire team over at the ACA, thank you so much for putting this on. And Ben, thanks for taking the time to be here as well. Ben and I have been working pretty close over the last couple of weeks to try to get this process to be set up and as smooth as possible. Before, I know we got a lot of people on here. They're going to dive into some of the specifics when it comes to the city expansions, et cetera. But before we get there, one thing I wanted to go over is just some things that from experience, we know restaurants need to kind of take a look at before they get to that expansion process. So Lisa, if you could go to the next slide, please. So, you know, it might seem strange, but there's just some basic things that restaurateurs should consider before they go down the process of starting to expand with their city or look into the grant. You know, for instance, what type of expansion are you going to need? You look at your available area. What of that available area is your landlord going to be able to give you, or do you have the staffing to be able to keep up with it? Is there going to be alcohol service? Well, you'll need to make sure you have different standards of barriers, et cetera. What type of structures are you going to be using? This will come into play down the road when you start talking about fire codes, et cetera. So you're looking into if you're going to have any type of shading structure or any type of windbreak out there, you're going to want to look at the type of material it's using, et cetera. And this is just a good idea to start gathering some of this information before you start the process. That way, if a question does come up in the city process or the county process, you have the information to quickly respond. You know, the name of the game here is really speed when it comes to extension of premises. And so one of our goals as an association is try to provide as much information up front so that when you're going through the review process at the city level, you don't need to have any back and forth. The idea is that when you put in an application, you're not even really getting contacted by the cities. They're looking at your plans, they have everything they need, and they can approve it and move on. Really where we see some of the hiccups that are happening in these processes are when operators are submitting something that might be missing a piece of information. That might be a small piece of information, but that ultimately leads to a couple days of delay as they go back and forth with the city staff for working on their project. So really our aim here is to try to help operators be prepared as possible. One of the big considerations is, are you planning on doing any type of food preparation in your extended outdoor area? If you are, what we want you to do before you start the process with the city is contact your county health department and see what additional rules they'll have for you to be able to conduct that food preparation outside. If you're not planning on doing any type of food preparation, you're just going to use your existing kitchen and prep facilities inside of your current premises, the process becomes a lot easier. But we do know that there are some operators that want to do some food preparation outside. A perfect example of that is like tableside guacamole. And if you do want to extend that out, just make sure that you're checking in with your county health department on that to see what additional procedures they have. Last thing we want to do is go through the whole extension process and then get caught up in a food code issue. One of the very first steps you should take is after you've thought about what additional area you want to expand to, what kind of barriers you're going to use, tinting, etc., is check with your landlord, get permission from them. What we suggest, every city has a slightly different process on how they go about this, but what we suggest for all cities is get this in writing, whether it's on letterhead or a lot of landlords have come up with form letters for this. And we want that approval from your landlord to be specific to the site plan that you will ultimately submit to the city. So what we suggest is for you to send your draft site plan over to your landlord and basically have them endorse that. So there's no questions on whether you're using an area that the landlord approved or not. That's one of the biggest things that we've seen that's gotten caught up in some of the city review process is the city wanting to go back and check with the landlord to see if this is approved. So if we do that on the front end, we can save a couple of days in that process. The other big one here is a lot of landlords do have some resources for their restaurants that are leasing from them. And it's just always a good idea to check with your landlord as you're seeking that permission to see if they have any resources. Do they have somebody on staff that can help you with your site plan review? Do they have resources? Maybe they have barriers already that you can use for free or for a discount. So it's always good to check with your landlord for those resources. And the one big change for anybody who watched the last boot camp related to extension of premises, one of the real big changes that came as part of the governor's executive order last week, which we greatly appreciate, is in the last boot camp, we really talked about the need to have the expansion be contiguous. But with the governor's new executive order, that has changed. And so this significantly changes what restaurants are able to do. And so you can separate your extended barrier up to 60 feet away from your premises. You still need to make sure you have all of the permission of your landlords and anybody whose rights of way that you're crossing, et cetera. But that is a huge help to us. And I just wanted to make that clear for restaurants who might have still been under the impression that had to be contiguous. That's no longer the case. You can go up to 60 feet away. And Lisa, could you go to the next slide, please? The Restaurant Association has created an extension of premises resource page, and it's very simple. It's just our website, azrestaurant.org/outside. And that also has links to the great site that the League of Cities and Towns put together, which is tracking some of these expedited processes, and it has links to the grant process as well. But it also dives a little bit deeper into some of the things that restaurants need to look at as they're going through the process with the city. I also want to say if anybody does run into any issues here, whether it's on the extension of premises side through the city or Department of Liquor License and Control, or if you have questions about the grant, feel free to contact me directly. That's my email and our office line, and visit the website. We're happy to help any restaurateur through this process to try to get as many people going as possible. So, Robert, that's all I have for now, and I'll stand by for questions.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Dan. We have one question. The Q&A there, and actually this will be for Ben when we get to the grant piece. So we'll hold off on that for a little bit. But let's go ahead and turn the time over to Roxana.
Thanks, Robert. Good morning, everyone. Roxana Pitones with the League of Arizona Cities and Towns. Thank you again to the ACA and to the Restaurants Association for allowing us to be a part of today's presentation. Cities and towns across the state have been working in partnership with restaurants and small business owners to do everything that we can to help them get through this time. And during the past several months, the League has again been working with the Restaurants Association and the governor's office, discussing ways that cities can help businesses thrive and make the process to extend outdoors as flexible and as easy to navigate as possible. So as we moved into the fall, a number of municipalities started implementing streamlined processes to help restaurants expand dining in outdoor spaces for those that hadn't been using that option already. Additionally, a number of cities and towns have allowed for the use of sidewalks or right-of-ways to allow for retail or restaurants to accommodate social distancing by using that outdoor space. Dan mentioned this a little bit, but a number of cities have created these one-stop shop approaches where, if you are a business owner, in the process of expanding outdoors and the process of going through the city is something that you might find intimidating or too overwhelming, cities have created one-stop shops where you have a direct point of contact that will be kind of like your liaison between the city and helping you get through this process, and helping walk you through the steps. Cities have also posted designated websites on their page that will outline the steps for restaurant owners to go through the application process and outlining kind of what they should be doing and what they need to submit. And lastly, a number of cities have also waived fees that are normally associated with special use permits. This is obviously, we know businesses are in a rough spot right now, so we want to kind of remove some of these barriers into making those expansions possible. So what you see before you on this slide is kind of the general process that operators should expect as they are thinking about going through an extension of premise process or trying to do some sort of outdoor expansion. Like Dan mentioned, I think we would recommend getting that authorization from your landlord. Some cities will have a letter of authorization that should be signed by the landlord in order to move forward in the expansion process. Additionally, if you are in an incorporated area, we recommend contacting your local city or town. Typically, this process is done through a zoning or planning division. Their economic development offices might be able to guide you as well as to where you should be, who you should be talking to in the city, and kind of the steps that you should take. A number of things, a common theme we've seen throughout the applications that we've seen from cities is that they might require some sort of site plan diagram where you would label the roads, where you would label where you're planning on having tables or seating, and where you have your fire lane access as well as ADA compliance. Those are two things that cities are mindful of and that want to maintain, obviously, access to the fire lane and fire exits, and also maintaining ADA compliance. Additionally, on the extension of premises topic, if you're an establishment that has an existing liquor license and you plan on serving alcohol in that expanded area, going through the State Department of Liquor License and Control for that extension of premise application. Last week, the governor announced the executive order related to outdoor dining, related to removing barriers for temporary extension of premises. I think prior to that, we had some issues where while the city was making the sidewalk or the right of way available to restaurateurs, because they were temporary extensions and they were non-contiguous, the department wasn't able to grant those extension of premises applications. With the executive order, those barriers have been removed. And so as long as it doesn't exceed that 60-foot parameter. Part of that EO also stipulates that the extension can only be approved after the city or town has approved that temporary extension. The city's role here is really to make that recommendation to the state. And in the past, prior to COVID, some cities would have that recommendation go through council, so that may have taken more time. But because of COVID and because we're trying to help restaurants kind of and be more flexible with them, a number of cities have moved this process so that the recommendation can be made by city staff. And therefore have a quicker turnaround time so that the operator can get that application in quicker to DLLC. A number of, or rather I should say, some cities are also stipulating insurance coverage requirements if you are going to be using that sidewalk or right of way. Typically what we've seen is in those instances, the city might just require that the city be named as an additionally insured entity on the restaurant's insurance policy. We found that generally coverage requirements that a city might require insurance coverage that the restaurant might already have is what the city would require. So it's generally hasn't been an issue, but if that is something that comes up for you, city officials are willing to work with the operators, take a look at your policy, and confirm that the city's requirements are being met. Lastly, once these expansions have been approved, it is likely that the duration of these permits is tied to an emergency declaration made by the municipality. So the nature of these permits are temporary, and they're really intended to provide that additional square footage that you may need as you try to abide by these social distancing guidelines. But like I said, these steps will vary slightly depending on your city or town, but these have been the common themes that we've seen in application processes. Before I close, I do want to point you all to a website that the League has put together where we outline these steps that I just mentioned, but also we list the city or towns that have some sort of expedited process in place related to extension of premises and expanding outdoors for businesses. If your city or town is not listed here, it is likely that they probably already have some sort of other special use permit process in place that also serves for this purpose. So we recommend contacting your city or town. I'm also putting the link to our municipal directory where you can search your city and go find the planning office or find zoning and talk to them and get your questions answered. But ultimately, city officials are eager to help facilitate this process, especially for businesses looking for a tool to help stay afloat during this time. And with that, I'm happy to turn it over to our next speaker.
Excellent. Thanks to you, Roxana. John, you're up.
Thanks, everybody. And Roxana, thank you. A lot of what you said, I think, applies to Prescott. So I'm John Heine. I'm the City of Prescott Community Outreach Manager in charge of communications, economic development, and tourism here. And I'm going to tell you about our process and how it works. And it speaks to some of the things that Roxana had mentioned. So we'll go to the next slide, please. So just to go back to when we started this program, we looked back in the summer, really right around the 4th of July. And we were contacted by, as the executive orders continued and there was restricted occupancy, several of our restaurants especially contacted us to talk about solutions and ways that they could get outside safely. So we had a small team, mainly led by our Public Works Department, but also city clerk and city manager's office and economic development. And we put together a program called the Parklet Program as a temporary measure to assist these businesses that have lost the capacity. So a parklet is, I haven't heard the term used a lot. So basically in the city of Prescott, what that means it is an outdoor dining platform. It is the three that we have are in public right of way and parking spaces. Now we do have measures and have had measures for restaurants to dine on the sidewalk, depending on the capacity of the sidewalk. And we have had some take advantage of it. But the parklet specifically is utilizing public parking spaces. This was contemplated as a temporary time frame. The liquor license extension allowing for up to 6 months. And this was all before the new executive orders were in place. And then we could also write a license agreement with each of these businesses to further define an approved timeline. One of the key points for this, because it is temporary, is it does allow for termination with 30 days written notice. So if things changed, if we were able to go back inside at full capacity, the city would have the ability to provide notice to the restaurants with 30 days. Since that time, we had some public discussion. Council reviewed this policy, and they actually agreed this fall to leave the program in place as long as the governor's executive orders remain. And given the numbers, I think we're not getting anywhere close to that changing. So this temporary program will remain in place in Prescott. And the mayor and some council members asked staff to start developing a program that could be ongoing, even past COVID, to take advantage of our weather, especially our summer and fall weather here, for an ongoing program that would be seasonal. And we are working on that currently. Next slide, please. So just to give you a little bit of an idea of the procedure and how we put this together and assembled it for the city of Prescott. The Parklet initial contact does go to the Public Works Department. Gwen Roach in our Public Works Department has been sort of that point of contact, a one-stop person that's been very helpful to get the process moving for the restaurants. As Roxana mentioned, we're looking for a site plan reflecting dimensions of the existing storefront, sidewalk layout, obstructions, and proposed temporary installations. The review process that we put in place was started with Public Works for right-of-way considerations, the building department for construction and engineering of these platforms, police for traffic safety, and of course, city clerk for extension of premise. The other one that's not listed here, but is an important advisory role in this process is our fire department, of course. So not just fire safety for the parklet, but also how does that impact access to the buildings that they have to service. So that's been an important advisory role as well. In our case, what we did is we required approval from neighboring businesses. In some cases, businesses asked if they could expand out in front of a neighboring business. Maybe they have a small frontage and they want a little bit larger platform. So we did require approval from neighboring businesses as well. And I believe that we have had approval from all of the landlords as well for these parklets as well. So once they get through that process, final steps are the license agreement is drafted. To Roxana's point about additional insurance, we stepped it up a bit and asked for $2 million in liability insurance, naming the city additional insured. The restaurants have been able to meet that. It isn't generally standard. Usually, I think it's $1 million. But we have at least one in a very high traffic area, a very busy part of town, and we just felt this was appropriate. And this is applied to all of the Parklet license agreements. And then, once the insurance, building and safety requirements are met, then it does go to city clerk for submission. And again, this was all done prior to the changes, but our city clerk's done a great job and working with DLLC to get those approved. And so we've had that capability to get those done. We have currently 3 parklets up in existence in the city of Prescott right now. So a couple of items to consider, and this is, for all cities and towns and for businesses thinking about it. Prescott definitely likes to debate issues, and we certainly had a lot of debate between retailers and the restaurants that were putting these up. We did extensive public outreach, surveys, talked to business owners of all kinds, and had a lot of public outreach and surveys and responses back. Council had a chance to hear all that feedback, and we're still continuing that conversation. But I think we understand the importance of restaurants, especially right now. They are uniquely impacted with their reduced occupancy, and that's why we felt this was an important program to put forward. The one thing that emerged after we put the program in place, and I think is going to be addressed, is there have been issues of gift clause and use of public property. So we are addressing that in our permanent policy that we're working on with probably some fees that are going to be associated with use of these parking spaces. I believe that's all for me. That's all I've covered, but thank you for the time.
Thank you, John. We appreciate sharing the example of what Prescott's doing to help this, and other communities can follow suit or are also doing some similar things. We're going to go ahead and turn the time over to Karen from the SBDC, and she's going to talk about some restaurant trends and how the SBDCs can help all of you restaurants out there.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Eads. I'm a business analyst with the SBDC at Yavapai College in Prescott. And what I want to talk about today is just some trends that we've been seeing with some of our clients that own restaurants, and then talk about one specific client to give you an example of how they've pivoted and have actually used this extension of services outdoors to expand their business. So we've been seeing, a lot of restaurant closings, but I also want to point out that we've seen a lot of openings too. I think what's happening is people that have had dreams of opening a business, they're using this time as they've been laid off or have had reduced work hours to actually chase their dreams, right? So although we have seen closings because of reduced capacity and occupancy for the restaurants, we have seen openings. So that's a very positive thing I want to point out. I have one client in particular that actually provided baked goods online and actually chose to open a brick and mortar at this time. So, which is a really good thing to see. Of the restaurants, that are staying open, they're having to deal with the reduced capacity. And so, as this whole presentation is talking about, this being able to expand into other areas has really helped them increase their capacity. So we've seen parklets, as John was talking about, specifically in Prescott, and this move to outdoor dining on patios wherever possible. The one person that I'm going to speak about actually moved out into the parking lot to expand. So we've seen some of that. But that's really been able to help restaurants increase their capacity. And then, of course, moving to pick up and carry out. So there's a lot of people that don't want to, go into a restaurant right now because of the numbers, going up in that. So having businesses that maybe in the past hadn't provided pickup or delivery service or carry out, we've seen that transition to that. And in doing so, those restaurants have actually had to set up online ordering on their websites that maybe they haven't had to do before. So that's a change in the way that they've had to do business. And we at the SBDC have been able to help clients with that change and talk through what's needed to actually, get online ordering on websites and such. So that's a change that we've seen. And then, of course, delivery service. Some restaurants are actually doing deliveries themselves, while others may be partnering with Grubhub or Uber Eats or one of those to get food out to clients as well. And then the other thing that we've been seeing and having a lot of conversations with clients is this whole notion of food trucks. So if food trucks provide mobility, the ability to set up at different places or set up in a permanent place. And that allows a lot of flexibility. There's lower overhead, and then reduced offerings a lot of times. So I actually have a client right now that closed their restaurant business and are looking at opening a food truck. And they want to do that because they can be mobile, but they also want to look at a permanent location so that they have that flexibility. And the intention is to offer a specialized menu that focuses on those offerings that were really popular in the restaurant. So just another way to kind of pivot the business, recognizing that with reduced capacity, it was really difficult to keep the business, the restaurant open. So let's look at this idea of a food truck and see how that works for the new business. So if we could go to the next slide, I want to talk about one of our specific clients. This is Roy Thomas. He owns Cuppers Coffee Houses in Prescott. And what he has actually done with his business, this is a great story. So he has a coffee house in one location. He converted his parking lot into a patio so that he could expand his outdoor eating area and serve more customers. The patio is, it's equipped with heaters. It has lighting for outside. He's actually set up a place for music. So he has music several nights a week. It's family friendly. There's actually a dog friendly area. He's actually set up a putting green out on that patio. But this is a way for him to expand the capacity of his coffee house. He also took advantage of an opportunity that came along. Unfortunately, there was a nearby restaurant that had to close due to COVID, issues and that. And he took the opportunity and actually purchased that restaurant. So that restaurant now provides food for dining out on the patio, which is a great, synergy right there. And then he also partnered with a nearby bar to offer alcohol both at his restaurant and at his outdoor dining patio. So really creative way to expand business, have more offerings for his clients, which has worked out really well for him. He's been able to increase his staff. He's actually doubled his gross revenue, and he's opened an additional coffee house in another location in Prescott, and has plans to actually expand again in 2021. So although we've seen, closings and that, I just want to highlight a really positive story about someone that looked at the current situation and found the opportunities, found ways to serve clients differently, and has really grown their business. So I think that's a really good story, and I wanted to highlight that. If we could go to the next slide. I just wanted to talk about a minute about our services. So, SBDCs, they're all throughout the state, actually all throughout the US, but we provide no cost one-on-one confidential counseling for our clients. And we've been helping restaurants and other businesses during this time. We appreciate our partnership with the ACA and doing these types of webinars. We also hold webinars to help small businesses. So we are available, and if anybody needs help, SBD services are available. So that's really all I have for today. Thank you for your time.
Nice. So thank you, Karen. Ben, we want to go ahead and give you some time right now so you can talk about the safest restaurant grant and share that information with the attendees.
You bet. Thanks so much, Robert. My name is Ben Blink. I'm one of Governor Ducey's policy advisors and work really closely with a number of the folks on the call around both local government issues and with economic development and economic affairs. So thanks so much to the League and to the Restaurant Association specifically for their help and their feedback on this specific project. So Dan spoke a little bit about the executive order. I'm going to focus specifically about the new funding available to help support restaurants that are expanding their premise. So starting this week, the governor is offering the Safest Outside Restaurant Assistance Program. And what it does is it offers up to $10,000 in expenditures for items such as outdoor furniture, barriers, patio heaters, parklets that restaurants and bars need to extend their premises to those approved outdoor spaces. What we're doing, the grant opened this week. It's available on the ACA website. And for those of you who weren't able to see or click on the links in the directly in the presentations, on the comments section or in the chat section as part of the webinar, I see that everyone's been posting their links alongside of that. So you can see those links there if you just click on the chat box. I'll post a link to the Arizona Commerce Authority website that has the links to the application for that grant program. So a couple of items about the eligibility for the grant, the up to $10,000 for those approved expenditures. So it's for licensed bars or restaurants legally owned and operated in Arizona that have been complying with the executive order and that are open to the general public and in good standing with the Department of Revenue. So we think most restaurants and operating within the state would be eligible for that. Note that the funding is only available for new extensions of premises. So we're doing this because there's limited amounts of funds available in the program, and the objective of this is to ensure that newly extended premises, so ones that haven't been opening and operating for the most part, have the opportunity to get the equipment they need to open up to more patrons. So right now, the date on that is October 1st, 2020. So if you got approval after that to expand your square footage, so if you had an existing outdoor space, but you're expanding more, that may be eligible. But it's basically focused on new extensions of premise. Any applicant may receive one award. So it's up to $10,000 per applicant. So the question we've received so far is about the ownership structure and also the 50 employees requirement as well. Eligible applicants must have 50 or fewer full-time equivalent employees. So I'll note that if you have, multiple part-time employees, those can be aggregated to get to that 50 full-time equivalent employee count. So just want to make sure restaurants are aware of that. We also want to ensure that we're distributing the funds fairly and not one restaurant owner that has, dozens of restaurant locations are getting funding in this opening round. So if you have an establishment that has 50 or fewer full-time equivalent employees, if you have multiple establishments, you're only eligible for one of these grants, and you'll have to attest to that in the application. So you need to ensure that if you're just one restaurant owner, you're eligible for up to $10,000. If you have multiple restaurants, the total amount you may receive is $10,000. In terms of what's allowable for the expenditures, it's basically what we're looking to do is fund the physical infrastructure that's required for your extension of premises. So parklets can be expensive. So if it's for parklets, if it's for those safety barriers, whatever the actual physical infrastructure is, that will be eligible. And the expenditures must occur after December 1st, 2020. So again, we want to be funding new expenditures to be extending premises in addition to what's already extended. And as part of the program for our grants process, you will need to submit your receipts for the program to demonstrate those expenditures and specifically what it was purchased on. A couple other quick requirements. If you received a local grant from your city or town for the same equipment, then you're not eligible for reimbursement under this program. Now, if your local program gave you specific funding for tables and chairs, and it's getting colder outside and you're in Flagstaff and you need heaters, if you got money for other expenditures, you can use those monies there and then also apply to this program. Our requirement is just that it's new. We don't want people double dipping and getting reimbursed for the exact same expenditures. We want this to actually be expanding the infrastructure that restaurants and bars have. And of course, we have a specific extension of premise approval timeline. We want to make sure these aren't just used for one-time events. So you must have approval to extend the extension of premise for a minimum of 3 months or the end of any local or state emergency declarations, whichever is sooner. So if your city or town has given you approval till the end of the emergency declaration, then you're absolutely eligible. You don't have to prove 3 months, but you have to have the intention to keep this space open for 3 months or at least until the end of the emergency, whichever is sooner. A couple of quick notes about the application itself. So on the link that I'll share in the chat box shortly that has the specific application, or it looks like Robert already posted that there, so you should be able to see the link right now. It's really important that we get complete applications. And early in this process, as this opened up, we've seen a number of incomplete applications that don't thoroughly explain the specific expenditures, that don't include the specific approvals, and that don't include budgets, again, for the specific expenditures. This is really important, and based on our grant reporting structure and just our due diligence to make sure we're using taxpayer dollars with the intentions of the program, it's essential that all those documents are included. So I would emphasize, don't apply before you have those items set. Wait for the approvals and wait for the specific definitions, because we absolutely can't fund things that we don't understand what the expenditures are for. So I'll leave it there. I've tried to answer a couple of questions in the chat already. I think I mentioned the October 1st deadline. That's the date that we've set for this particular round of this funding. If more funding is available or we don't go through the specific amount of funding, then there may be some opportunity to change that October 1st date, but that's the date we've set so far to ensure that we're only funding new extensions of premise. Let me see if there's anything else there that I missed from some of the answered questions that have come through, not related to the grant program, but asked if the governor's executive order applies to restaurants that serve alcohol. and for whether they can apply for the temporary extension of premise that's non-contiguous to the restaurants. The answer is absolutely yes. And the executive order is mostly directed at our Department of Liquor Licensing and Control to ensure that they have some latitude to approve those, regardless of whether they're non-contiguous and regardless of whether they're only approved on a temporary basis. So that was very quick. Happy to answer any other questions that may come up.
All right, excellent, Ben. We appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and read some of these questions off, and it may be for Dan or Roxana or John. This one, the first one says, I contacted my permanent and economic department several times since Thursday. I've been bounced around between departments. I finally got someone to answer me, and they said the temporary permit won't be available to fill out until Friday. Any recommendations for Melissa on that?
Hi, Robert. The only thing that I would say is that we've had a number of cities or a few cities recently implement some sort of expedited process. So we'll see that some of them are still working through that. I recommend checking in with the city once that application process is available and working with them. And again, like I said, if a city doesn't necessarily have a specific expedited or streamlined process for this, it is likely that they have some sort of temporary use process in place. So I would recommend going through their zoning or planning divisions and seeing what that process is like there.
Okay. And I think also what Ben mentioned on that is mean that everything has to be complete on the grant application. The rush to get it in on Monday may have been too early because of all the making sure all the processes are there and the expenditures and so forth. So, getting everything together by the end of the week, I think you'll have that complete application, which is important. This is a good question. I think this would be for Ben. Does the outdoor equipment need to be purchased, or can rented equipment expenses be covered by the grant?
That's a great question. And Francesca, thanks for asking that. So far, we've only contemplated purchased equipment, but let me touch base with our grants team to get some clarification on that. I think our goal here is for the extension itself to be permanent and to have a minimum of 3 months of an extension or until the end of the executive order, whichever is sooner. Let me touch base with our grants team on that to see what's permissible under our rules, and that's something that we can explore more.
Excellent, thank you. And then Ben, this one's for you. It says from Jeff, and he's asked a couple that have tied in regarding an extension that was done before October 1st. Would they be eligible? The guidance, makes that clear, but does that mean that new purchases could be used to improve the existing space as well?
Yeah, thanks so much. So Jeff, as I mentioned before, with the limited funds that we have for the program right now, the goal of the program is to support additional expansions of premises. So what we don't want to be doing at this point is funding equipment for spaces that are already open and are serving customers within those spaces. We want to be facilitating more outdoor dining in our communities right now. So right now, the rules of the program are extensions that were approved after October 1st. Again, if you've got a space that you're operating and you're expanding beyond that after October 1st, then that would certainly be eligible. But if more funding becomes available in future rounds, then we can explore those options around both the pre-October 1 deadline and the question of whether it can support equipment for existing spaces that are extended.
Excellent. John, this question's for you. In reference to the programs that Prescott was doing, is that for downtown only or for all of Prescott?
Oh, that's a good question. So the 3 that have gone up have been in our downtown district. As we look to our permanent policy, we are currently defining that downtown district area. So I think it will be primarily for downtown, where there are city parking spaces. But notably, we have had some businesses in private property outside of downtown in parking lots and things set up temporary structure, well, not structures, but perhaps tents or outdoor areas. So, but this program, the Parklet program, is going to be for our downtown district.
Okay, excellent. So talking about the grant, I know we posted a link for the Restaurant Association. They have some great information on there. I want to share my screen real quick and show you the ACA website. I posted the link, but here's the information you'll see when you go to that website, and you'll see additional guidelines and applications down here at the bottom. This is just the basic information. When you click on that, it will take you to this eCivis page. And again, it has the overview. This eligibility tab lists a lot of great information. It's probably really hard for you to read on your screens, but I just wanted to show you this because there's a lot of great information that I think people are missing when they go to this page. There's some information on the financial piece, and this contact piece is very important as well, because it gives a link to Ben's team that is managing this grant. And from my understanding, they are responding very quickly to the questions that come up about it. So there's a lot of very good information on this page. So I want to share those key resources with everybody about the grant as you have those questions come up.
Hey, Robert.
Yes.
I just wanted to point out one thing since you went over that process. One of the things that we've gotten direct feedback from our members who've been filling out this process is they've run into some technical difficulties, but most of those have been solved by using Google Chrome. Most of the issues we saw with them were when they were using like a Microsoft Internet Explorer platform. So I just want to point that out. If you're just starting the process, try to do it on Google Chrome. It prevents a lot of the problems that we've seen.
Excellent. Thank you, Dan. Appreciate that. It doesn't look like we have any more questions. We have a few more minutes, so if you have any other questions for anybody on the panel, please share those in the Q&A.
I believe Chelsea has a question here. She has her hand raised. I'm going to unmute her.
Okay.
Chelsea, do you want to unmute? I asked her to unmute, but I guess she can't. Oh, she's there. Can you unmute, Chelsea? Oh, I don't know. I don't know where she went. Maybe we'll try again. We have someone else. I'm going to allow them to talk. Jeff, are you there?
Hi, yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
All right, thanks. Hey, thanks everybody. This has been fantastic. I work with the city of Mesa, and I have a question. I posed this to Ben, and if you already answered this and I didn't hear it, I apologize, but I'll give you a very specific situation. We have a downtown property owner who has an existing patio. It's very small. It is teeny tiny, and what we allowed him to do was to expand in front of his neighbor's property. And so that gave him a lot more space, and he's going to be using this very generous grant to help him improve that space, because right now it's pretty bare bones, doesn't really have anything, and it was done after October. So my question is this, is that he is probably going to want to get space heaters as it's starting to get colder, and he's going to want to put those in that new expanded space, because again, it's very bare bones, there's nothing there, and it gets very cold at night. Okay, to us, very cold in Arizona. And my question is if you wanted to buy another space heater and plop it into the adjacent and connected existing tiny patio, would that be an eligible expense, or would that be considered ineligible because he's taking this grant and putting it into the existing patio? My argument is that it all functions kind of as one cohesive patio, but I do understand this is specifically for the extension too. So how would that be applied?
Great question, Jeff. I think the main point from our side is new extension of premises. If there's newly approved space that equipment's being used, and it's expanding beyond something after October 1st, I would say, eligible expenses include anything that can be used as part of that, greater expansion to increase the capacity and to safely serve customers. So I think from there, some of the nuances, we're not going to micromanage the operations of the business in terms of if they're shifting tables from one side of their space to the other. We're not going to focus on that at all. But we just want to see that the expansion of space being used to serve their customers.
Excellent. Thank you, Ben. Looks like we have Chelsea on to ask her question.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Chelsea.
Sorry, I'm in and out of service over here in Clarkdale, Arizona. I was just curious if you run through that $1 million of funding provided by Governor Ducey's order, do you expect to see any more funding coming in for these types of projects in the future?
Hey, thanks so much, Chelsea. For any program that we look at the demand for that specific program, the funds that we have available, and whether we think it's serving its intended purpose. So, I'm not going to guarantee that more funding would become available. I haven't, and our team hasn't kind of in aggregate yet reviewed the scope of the applications that have come in. But if it's a widely successful program and people are taking advantage of it, and we think it's making a difference, then we're always looking to expand good programs further.
Okay, thank you.
We've got time for one last question from Emily, and this might be more for Roxana. It says, I'm curious if any cities are exploring flex zones or something where multiple businesses can be or can share an extended space, like for an example, an entire block of parking or even an extra travel lane.
Sure. Thanks, Emily, for the question. I think we've had a couple cities, I'm thinking about the East Valley right now, that have opened general park spaces to allow for either restaurants in the area to, or rather patrons of restaurants to eat there in like a sort of park space with tables, but it's open for you to bring in food from multiple restaurants if you'd like. I believe that was the city of Chandler. I wanted to say that the city of Flagstaff, prior to them getting into the lower temperatures, had something like that as well, where they had areas of their downtown just kind of open for that type of seating and dining and vendors to come in. And we've also had other cities consider it. I believe the city of Tempe was on the verge of doing something like that. However, they had to postpone it due to the rising number of COVID cases and out of an abundance of caution. But I think hopefully once cases start to go down, we can see more of those type of flex zones surface again.
Excellent, thank you. Well, it looks like we're just about out of time, so I want to thank everybody for attending. Ben, we appreciate you jumping on in the last minute and sharing that information on the grant. Roxana, Dan, John, Karen, thank you so much for sharing your expertise and your information with everybody. We appreciate you taking the time to join us on this boot camp. Real quick reminder to all the attendees, again, we have another session on alternative funding sources tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. You can register on our website if you haven't already. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up. Again, I want to thank everybody for attending, both the panelists and the attendees, and we will see you tomorrow. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thanks, Robert.
Thank you.